Morning everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking the Z650 for an MoT or Controle Technique. You may have seen the video on the RD where we did the same thing and we discussed afterwards what happened at the testing station. We'll take it over to a different testing station today. So we'll get out of the village and you can join me on the road.
And welcome to the test centre. First up, I don't have their express permission to film here, so I'm going to be discreet as to what I show and obviously not film anybody. We are at a different test centre to where we took the RD. We're just waiting for the car in front of me to finish and I'll see what I can photograph and show you. So a quick look inside. This is the test area for cars. You can see the usual brake testing equipment and emissions testing equipment here on the left. At the far end of the garage is where they test the bikes. Let's see if we can get a quick look in there. So this is the bike testing area. Equipment that we can see are some paddock stands, a jack or bike lift and a wheel chock. No sign of the hoist that was at the RD centre. So a limited amount of equipment here, but probably just about enough to do the job in hand. Okay, so I'm waiting outside the test centre because we've run into a problem. First of all, I had to wait about 15 minutes while he was on the phone, I guess the DECRA head office, because he didn't know whether or not we had to do an emissions test on the bike. I told him we didn't, but he needed to check that out. Secondly, he printed out the control for me. It passed, but he only dated it for 3 years and it's for 5 years for these older historic bikes. So another 2 phone calls, another 15 minutes later to head office, and I've ended up with 2 certificates. I'll show you when I get home, it'll be easier. Here are 2 testing papers side by side. You'll see one's dated 2027 and the new one is 2029, as it should be. So join me on the ride home. This is a little city called Fanzhou. So what have we learnt from today? Well, I'll be honest with you, this is the second control I've had done. 2 different bikes at 2 different test centres, and I'm not overly confident in the system that's been implemented here. These big companies that own these test centres, these franchises, don't seem to have fully trained their techs on the different requirements between a modern bike and a classic bike, and that was clearly the case today with the constantly having to phone head office for information and advice. They certainly seem competent in the use of the equipment that they have to test cars and vans. So, you know, where we saw the brake testing area and the emissions testing area. But I mean, that is like a kind of a tick box system. I don't know whether they have to be qualified motor mechanics in any way, have some sort of engineering qualification, I don't know. They certainly don't seem to be motorcycle technicians. You get that feeling with somebody when they're comfortable around bikes, you know, the way they handle them and stuff like that. And I've not really had that, certainly not today. And then thinking back to when we had the RD tested, the equipment that was used today again was different from then. If you recall, the RD, there was like some huge hoist gantry type contraption where they lifted the bike up into the air, whereas here it was paddock stands and a centre jack. Now, okay, fair enough, but I mean, a centre jack, you know, if you're working on a bike on your own, which these guys are in my experience, using a centre jack to hoist a bike up from underneath, I think, is asking for trouble if you're doing it on your own. And I think at this stage it would be fair to say that the equipment that they use doesn't appear to be of a national standard. It's kind of whether or not the owner or operator of the control centre thinks what they might need with a minimum amount of outlay. And I'm not sure that they're trained on how to use this either. They buy it and then just see how they get on. And unlike cars and vans, there appears to be no calibrated tests, particularly for braking efficiency or headlamp output. The two kind of major things you think that they would want to focus on. Anyway, enough about the test itself. What else has been happening in France? Well, there are a lot of protests against the control techniques, led particularly by the Fédération de Bikers de France, and they are just one group of many. Quick look on Facebook and you'll see them all over the place. Firstly, they tried to resist the legislation, and now they are pressing for mass non-compliance, but to be honest, I'm not sure how many people will be able to do this. Clearly I have rolled over and complied, mostly because insurance companies are saying that they will invalidate insurance without a current control technique. And whilst a little low side that you might have, is insignificant, if you have a major accident where somebody's injured without insurance, that could be absolutely bankrupting. So I have to ask myself, what is the point of these tests if so little attention is being paid to the key mechanical functions of bikes? I have to say that here there is a widespread belief that it's an infringement of your rights and your liberty, and that this is nothing more than a cash grab dressed up as a safety concern by both big businesses and government. It also ever so conveniently slots in nicely with the government and European-wide environmental policy. There are ULEZ schemes in most cities here in France, and although at the moment they're not as draconian as the ones I understand are in effect in the UK, they are coming in slowly but surely. So obviously there's an untapped market here for a cash grab, but also an opportunity to impose a compliance regime, seeking to outlaw modifications as a first step, bringing motorcycles under the same sort of environmental controls that apply to cars and vans, and maybe a creeping ban on classic bikes that are non-compliant with emission standards, a creeping ban on petrol engines altogether. To be perfectly honest, there's a whole other video that could be done on how we got here, from the corporate lobbying, iffy safety studies, governments recognising there's opportunity to raise cash. This is a particular rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down, and I'm going to leave it for you guys to debate in the comment section on this one. I just want to thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, please consider commenting, and please consider subscribing. And I promise that I'm going to get onto the video comparing the original Kawasaki Z650 with the new one.